How's it going? Thank you for joining us here. With the United Goalkeeping Alliance and the Goalkeepers podcast. And today we are going to continue our conversation on mental health. And specifically today, we're going to talk about mental health around college coaches, the college game, and some of the different issues that college coaches could go through, do go through, and what we can do to kind of help some of those coaches going through that. So on the call today, we have Coach Michael Zauzig and Coach Kevin Murphy, both college coaches. And I'm going to let Coach Kevin, introduce himself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Kevin Murphy. I am a assistant coach and goalkeeper coach at Merrimack College on the men's side. Merrimack is a little bit north of Boston. We are in the Northeast Conference, which is a Division I conference, and I've been there for 5 years. 5 years, yeah.
And Michael?
Yeah, Kevin, I know what you mean. Time goes quickly coming out of COVID here. So, Michael Zauzig, I'm currently an assistant and goalkeeping coach for Carnegie Mellon University, Division III in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I also work with FC Arsenal Pittsburgh, work with a variety of teams in our college prep phase and some of our youth developmental phases as well.
Yeah, and the first thing I was going to say is I don't coach in college. I don't coach high school, so I don't know what the schedule looks like. I don't know what that grind looks like. My grind is a little different because I coach club. So I know what a typical club season looks like. I've been through it X amount of years. What does the college soccer schedule look like for a college coach? Let's just say I'm being hired for the 2022-2023 season. What would that look like for me from beginning to end? Who wants to go first?
It's sure. I was going to say, first off, it's going to be different. Obviously, the NCAA has different rules per division. We previously were in Division II, so I guess I could sort of speak to both 2 and 1. 2 was very similar in the sense that you would report to spring training or preseason around mid-August. That definitive date varies every year, but it's about the middle of August when your personal life pretty much is over. We're talking 2-a-days for the most part for about 2 weeks or so, and then we start seeing some preseason games. Then from there, that season will run you till first week of November. We are not eligible for the postseason per the NCAA rules around when you move up a division. So that's when our season would end. Typically, we'd then have an ID clinic after that. Then we kind of go quiet after around Thanksgiving. Kids go back for either Thanksgiving break or it just sort of really does get quiet for them. For us, recruiting goes sort of full tilt, and then it's sort of a mad dash to see who can get those verbal commitments from guys. And fast forward to about end of January is when we start playing spring. Spring ball is a little bit more regulated in terms of hours that you can commit. They're starting to ramp up, and we'll start playing first of 5 preseason games this Saturday, and that is the most we can play. And that will wrap up around April, and the kids will go home, and then we'll do it all over again mid-August. So a whole bunch of stuff in between, but that's in the spring. Obviously, we're talking about recruiting now that we can physically get to games. It's hopefully going to change the dynamic of recruiting, less of a need for video and more eyes on players, but we'll see. But I'd say that's 365 in my world. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, it's really similar as Kevin prefaced, and it's so true. The NCAA has different rules and regulations based on divisions. But same thing with me. When you get to August 1, summer's over. Time to get going, time to be ready to go. Same thing mid-August for us start. Last year, we were fortunate enough to be in the Sweet 16. So we were in the second half of November. And from there, as Kevin said, that's kind of where everybody takes a deep breath. And you probably get that for a couple of days because especially with COVID ending, more and more events are popping up. There's more recruiting to be done. You get into the winter. For us, recruiting is so big. And I'll come back to that in a second. And then our spring is very different. We can actually only have limited sessions at Division III. So 5 weeks, 15 practices, 1 day of competition, which I think on the surface feels very like, oh, it's not a lot. But as Kevin said, there's so many other factors that are coming in. And obviously the game's evolving as we'll get into our conversation here. But one of the biggest things for us is in the women's soccer and especially soccer as a whole, the calendars of recruiting are pushing the pendulum on a lot of other sports. And so we feel that pressure. Not only do we have a January 1 admissions deadline that we're probably trying to be a year out. We're almost, for example, our 23 class, we're going to hopefully have that done by the summer. And so that pendulum is really getting pushed because everybody's competing. And so, especially now with COVID. So there's a variety of factors just in recruiting there, as Kevin said. I think that's probably the biggest stress of us. But like I said, as we dive into the conversation here, I'm sure we can come up with more topics and more ideas and things that keep us up at night.
So from the perspective of, so you have your calendar, you have your schedule, you know what to expect. How do you prepare for kind of that social how do you deal with that slowdown in your social life, whether it's family at home, friends, whatever have you, that you know is going to happen right after summer? How have you both handled that? Right, and I'm going to go to Michael first. How have you handled that? And is it something that you find that you're okay with? It's just part of the job. How do you deal with that? And again, right, from my perspective, I'll just give you some of my experience. For me, summer's very busy. We train year round, so there's camps in the morning, training at night. So that same thing applies to what I do, but it's only like a month or two, or maybe a month and a half. And then you have summer, then you have like vacation, and you also have 4th of July week. So there's all these things that break that up. So it's not a consistent 2, 3, 4 months in a row. So how do you deal with that?
I'll be interested to hear what Kevin has to say. As you asked that, Art, I think my first thought is I describe to people that coaching isn't a job, it's a lifestyle. And you have to, you go in knowing that. And I think it's why you see a lot of burnout, because I think there are people out there at times too that there is a tremendous amount of stress, and recruiting does feel like a rat race at times. And like you said, then you're kind of sacrificing these elements that you just prefaced. For me, I kind of joke with friends and family now. They know me well enough. I've been doing it long enough. They're like, oh, so this is where you go into hibernation for a while. Good luck. It's one of those things where we always preface that I think balance is the hardest thing to find. One of those things that I'm continuing to work on myself. And so I think there's an understanding with the people in my life. There's an understanding with myself. You have to be realistic about, kind of your own expectations as well, and understanding, hey, what am I able to do? What am I not able to do? And I think, as you said it is really important to recognize those moments in the summer or in the off season where you can take a week or a few days to recharge and step away. I don't think I did that enough as a young coach, and I'm trying to do that more now with a little bit of experience. But like you said, it is tough, and there are items that get sacrificed, and there is always something you can do. And it's especially for me, and I like I said, I'll be very interested to hear how Kevin talks about this. There's always that little voice in the back of my mind of saying, oh, you watched some hockey tonight. What was somebody else doing? And I'm like, oh, gosh, I should have made that call, or I should have done this. So, yeah, like I said, I tell people all the time, I'm so fortunate for what I get to do, and I love what I do. But there are a lot of innate factors, and there are sacrifices that come with it.
Yeah, it's balance is the key word, as Michael said. I wouldn't say I have it, but it is I am aware that is the goal. Unfortunately, I think what happens is we just go into these sort of surges in the college world, and it never really goes away in the back. It's in the background, but once we start, the fall, or even now the spring is now, it's almost like fall 2.0 in terms of commitment. It's not as much, but it's still, 2-3 hours a day, five times a week. And it's sort of the balance at home gets really tossed in flux. And so, for me as a father, my kids are kind of getting to an age where they're starting to play sports, and then there's that I'm not there because I'm coaching someone else's kids, and it's sort of it. I don't know. It evolves, and I definitely want to echo what Michael said. The young coach in me would have taken any job, and would have probably coached 10 hours a day, just trying to, I don't know, maybe prove myself, or what it is, get better. But now it's less is more. I love the college game, and I think I finally had that realization that this is a good place for me. I want to find ways to keep teaching the young ones, but I don't think it's going to come by way of a club schedule, and trying to make the two work. It's just it's really, really hard, especially in the fall. So for me, when I am home, I have to be present, and that sometimes is the hard part. And I've heard about it quite a few times from my wife. When you're here, you're not here sometimes, and you're thinking about what else is going on, and that's something I got to get better at, and just turning it off. And I'm not a head coach. If I were, then yes, heavy lies the crown. You've got to be on 24/7 responsibility, but as an assistant, I need to draw lines where this is my time.
So both of you mentioned the change over from young coach to experienced coach, or someone who's more experienced, right? Because we never stop learning. When did that shift happen for you? At what point did you recognize or realize that your priorities were changing or needed to change, based either on, like, what you were talking about, feedback from your family, or just from the burnout piece? Can you pinpoint, or at least maybe talk a little bit about that point where that change happened for you, where we went from young coach to experienced, and said, these are where my priorities are going to lie? Kevin.
Geez, I mean, it was probably after doing too much, and then having it sort of blow up a little bit, and then you have that sort of little rock bottom moment where you're like, yeah, this something's got to give here. And for me, I think it was doubling up on college, and trying to handle the role of a club goalkeeping director, and also trying to have a job as a teacher. It was way too much, and it was not only was I missing that time at home, but I was also pushing that burden of the routines at home on my wife, and it was just far too much for her. And so I stepped away from that, and now I'm just in this kind of college role, which again, not when you are an assistant, you can be a little bit more inclined to just say, I can't be there for this. Not all the time, because that's you've committed, but at the same time, if something were to come up, it's good to have that ability to just say, something's more important at home, and there's always going to be something more important at home.
Oh, that was a loaded question, Art. I was thinking about it.
I'm speaking as if my wife's going to hear this, I think.
Wow.
Smart.
The one reason I love doing these too, Art, and we talk about it, we can be so candid on here and talk about things and hopefully shed a little light. And I mean, every time I talk to Kevin or somebody else in our organization, you learn, and that's what it's about. But I think for me, I was very fortunate. I was hired as a head coach at 24. I still remember the interview, and they said, "Are you ready for this?" No. Hope you still hire me, but no. Yeah. And I learned so much, and obviously still learning. And I'm very fortunate, to be part of a staff that I learn from every day at Carnegie Mellon. And, and other experiences I've had, I think the two biggest changes, to share these two stories with you. One was, so I was at Southern Vermont College, and the college closed as a whole. And it's one of these moments in my life that I'll never forget. And what I'll never forget is the emotion that came with it. And there was a moment after 8 years of being there and finding out and having an envelope in your hand, because it's something you can't control. There's this moment of like, wow, do I still want to do this? Is this worth it? Like, and you start to ask those big questions, and all of a sudden wins and losses don't matter. And you start thinking more about like, okay, which players walked across and got a diploma, which players are in grad school. Like, and I've always I feel like had that holistic approach, but it really hit me hard because it made me think like, I missed weddings. I missed births. I missed family events. I'll get to the next one. It's okay. And you realize those are concrete. Those are limited. Games are to an extent, but if you coach, you're always going to have games. You're always going to have training. And after everything closed, it really made me kind of reevaluate. And that was part of how I transitioned back to Pittsburgh to be at Duquesne for 2 years before Carnegie Mellon. I was like, I need to not be 450 miles from family. I need to be able to get home a little bit more. I need to be able to visit people and do little things like that. So that was one of those really, I mean, that was probably a month to a 6-week process of like the emotions that came with that and looking for a new job and thinking like, I have an entire life here, but now I've got a job. Like there's a lot. I think the other one too is, you know, we've talked about it, mental health and how it's becoming so critical, and we try to get more resources to our athletes. And what can we learn? And there was one of these moments where I was talking to a sports psychologist about the team and like, I need to do this and I want to do this. And that person looked at me and goes, how are you? I'm fine. Like genuinely, how are you? And like asked about my lifestyle and my work, and it all of a sudden, half an hour later, it's not about my team anymore. It's about me. But it was super telling. And that was where like, she goes, I think you're doing wonderful things, but you clearly don't have balance. And I don't know if you see that. So I'm going to flat out like, look at me, tell you, you got to find some. And so I think those were two kind of defining moments for me, recognizing like, wow, I've got to look at this differently. Because at the end of the day too, the training session didn't go well. Like I coached one on Monday and I'm still frustrated about it. Didn't go the way I wanted. But at the end of the day, those girls trust you. They work with you. They support you. On Kevin's side, it's the men. And they're going to be there ready to work the next time you get on the field. That won't make or break them. But if you're not at your best, you certainly can't ask them to be at theirs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's interesting, and not that this is the only two buckets, but I do know some folks that you know, were right out of the gate after college, started coaching, and you know, maybe like yourself, Michael, 24 years old, 25 years old, they're getting, you know, head coaching jobs, and it's sort of, they hit a wall, not all, but just there is a potential wall of, because it's all, you know, post college, where then you have some of us like myself, I was doing a little bit, but then after college and kids happened, and I was away for about 8 years, and then coming back, I was sort of recharged, and I don't know, maybe older, wiser, and how I was going to approach things. And I think even had the realization that I'm not at a point where I could even handle, you know, a head coaching job or would want to. 3 years ago, I thought, all right, I'll do this, this, and this, and get myself there. But you see all that it entails, and you're just maybe like, not yet. And it's you know, two different sides of the street. But you know, I don't know which, if there's ever a right way, but it's just you know, I've kind of seen, even on the good side, when you're, you know, kind of going right up the ladder fast, you if you don't, hopefully you have those moments that Michael had where you can take a step back, and it doesn't, you know, it's not too late, because you have so much to give, but it's just you do have to give a little bit more to yourself in the process.
Now, what does that look like for you, giving to yourself? You know, what does that mean to you, and what does that look like to you? Obviously I can only speak to my experience. So I have we're all creatures of habit, right?
Yeah.
So some of the habits that I have are going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. My mornings looks the same. My afternoons look the same. And then I get ready for training. And then by the time I get home, then, you know, there's no phone, there's no computer, there is me going to bed and watching some cartoons, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm very regimented in the things that I do. I do the food prep, and so those are things to me that help me get through my week, get through the day. And that's not to say, when I say get through, I don't mean to wish my time away or wish my week away. It's just things that I know are going to make my life easier.
Yeah, it's a
It's not
sense of accomplishment. Yeah.
it just completely, it just makes my life easier, and it just gives me more time down the line.
Yeah.
So what are those things for you? What does that look like for somebody who's coaching in college in season, and then maybe also while on the recruiting trail, because that's a big piece of the college pie. So what does that look like?
You want me to answer? Yeah, for me, I think it's just when I'm not there, just learning how to disconnect and learn how to say no. Be there at home. I'm looking forward to the fall, being able to coach my daughter's team. Haven't disclosed that yet, but that's a priority to me, because it's that's where the balance for me is going to come from, is taking this thing that I've been doing for and applying it in a more closer to home way, and I think that is going to be incredibly rewarding. It's just about that. I think the story that comes to mind is our other assistant coach, and I hope he's okay with me telling this. His son's going to be coming to the school next year, playing for him, and I asked, what's that going to be like? And your mind goes to, how am I going to coach my son? What's it going to be like? Are people going to think that I'm playing favorites or anything like that? Is none of that. It was just that he gets to spend time with him and be with him, because his life has been always going somewhere else, and so he was truly looking forward to that, and that sort of made sense to me at that point. It was like, okay, yeah, I get that, because you're going 100 miles an hour for someone else's kids, and then you're like, okay, this is what I want to do, and he gets to find that balance of his passion and his love, his kids. So I don't know, I think for me, it's just getting away from the game is a good thing. And, I even just teaching, there's a lot of similarities, but you still get to make those relationships with the kids, and it's finite. When the day's going to end, and you get to go home.
Michael,
wow.
What does that look like for you? In season, out of season, preseason?
Kevin, you want to keep going, or do you want me to jump in?
No, I'm good. Yeah, no, I mean,
I'm thinking about everything you're asking here, Art, and I in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, tomorrow I have a 6.5 hour trip to Richmond, Virginia for Jeff Cup, and how that goes. Like Kevin made a great point a few minutes ago, and as did you. It's not only the disconnection part, but also allowing yourself with being okay with that. And I think that's one of the toughest parts for me is, okay, I should disconnect. But in meanwhile, you're like, okay, so what's going on with the score, and what's going on over here, and where are we at in our league again, and how you truly step away. For me, it's been about developing. And I always talk to our athletes. I think male or female, when they're done with college, it's really hard, because your entire life has been defined by being an athlete. I probably fit that category a little different than Kevin, because although I had a teaching cert, I used it as sub, but I became a coach very quickly. So my life has always been involved in sports. So I think I kind of defined myself through that. And now it's redefining myself as I get a little bit older, and what are my hobbies and what are things. One of the things I did a couple of weeks ago was I went snowboarding. I just took the day. I took everything off my agenda, and I went snowboarding for like 4 hours. And it was great. I didn't take any calls. I didn't respond to any text. I separated for the entire day, and forget how valuable that is. Trying to get into reading more, although I really like movement. This is going to be an odd one. A break from soccer is sports. And I say this and people go, what? But I'm a sports fanatic. So right now I'm really, for, not everybody's in Pittsburgh with me. So I'm really entranced on how the Pens are doing and getting ready for the playoffs. But I'm a big sports guy or music lover. So I think recognizing that it's okay to take that opportunity and knowing that you're going to be better off because of it. So for me, it's been redefining those hobbies and learning more about what I want and what I enjoy, and also understanding, hey, this might be my thing and it might not be somebody else's. That's okay. It's my thing. And that's what helps me move forward and helps me tick a little bit better.
Do you watch soccer? And here's why I ask.
Oh my goodness.
I don't watch soccer, like, at all. The only time I watch soccer is when my kid has it on and it's the MLS. And I'm not saying like the MLS. She's watching an MLS game. We have the package and she wants to sit down and watch it, and we'll watch it, and it's all good. That's it. Like, there's no EPL, there's no Serie A, there's no La Liga. And I love soccer, and I'll look at Twitter and look at how Real Madrid did, and I know they got shellacked by Barca the other day. So I'm not disconnected from the world, but I don't watch soccer. And I think that has been something that I've started to do, like, on purpose, because I already do so much of it during the week, and my biggest chunk of the soccer, of where I do get to watch it, is the coaching education and game film and stuff like that I have to go through. But other than that, like, I don't follow a whole lot of leagues. Do you?
Yeah, Kevin, or Kevin,
Yeah,
you want to go
ahead,
first?
Michael.
Oh yeah, Art, so much of it. Like I said, I think it's one of those ones that it's a blessing and a curse. I'm always learning, I'm always evaluating, but on the same note, do I really give myself a break? I love the Premier League. Absolutely love the Premier League. I love the fact that Jesse Marsh is in it now, and obviously we need to be paying attention to him. Obviously, with all the young Americans, I am huge into our national teams. Like, the amount of podcast and radio coverage I've listened of counterattack. I start giving out publicity to all these other guys in the world, but counterattack and United States of Soccer on Sirius XM about the U.S. getting ready for Mexico and how important it is, and how I don't even know what state I'll be in if we're not in the World Cup come next week, but I'm not going to go to that right now. I think one of the things, though, it's interesting, the balance I found into that is I don't watch a ton of the Italian league, for example. So I don't watch a lot of that, or I don't watch a lot of La Liga. So Serie A and La Liga, I kind of pushed over. I watched some of the Bundesliga. So for me, it's more about American players. And not that I would tell you one league's better than the other, but I think I've said these are the two that I'm going to pay a lot more attention to. And I think that helps me balance a little bit. One of the mistakes and things that I want to try to do better is watch more locally. What's going on our USL, just because that's becoming such a developmental system for us. And the MLS is becoming a very good product. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but it's becoming a very, very good product, and trying to watch more of that. So yeah, I've had those days where I'm working on a scouting report, which I watch 3 matches of a team and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's 7:00 World Cup qualifier. Get that boy on. So yeah, I find myself watching quite a bit of the game.
Kevin?
Yeah, it's, there's definitely elements of what Michael said, and I'm almost like the 25% version of you, as in terms of definitely what the interests are. Like, something has to give on the, on the major, on whether it's the Premier League, Serie A. I guess try to be aware of what's happening at a very 40,000 feet view. I think it's something that is obviously a talking, conversational type of stuff with the guys about what's happening. We are a very international team. So, it's good to know a little about a lot, but I'm by no means like living and dying by any teams. I love the Premier League, having it on a Saturday morning and just seeing, those are usually games that are, worth watching. They've been sort of selected to have the most attention. So, but definitely the USA guys, and just having sort of a finger on the pulse, I think, is important. As the goalkeeping side of it, I think it's important to have these sort of awareness of who you like as goalkeepers, as conversationally, just to bring up, because there's still differences in style and who they are and how they play. And so just I don't want to be like truly out of the loop, but at the same time, it's not sustainable for me to be like a diehard fan, or to isolate myself and watch a game as much as I want to. It's probably a good thing that USA's on at 10 Thursday night for me, because I know I'll just watch it by myself when everyone's asleep, and I'll be truly happy. But I don't know if I could say, no plans on Sunday, we're watching this. It wouldn't fly.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you're right. Knowing a lot about, a little bit about a lot of things is super important as coaches, and be able to have that relatability to our players. Right. I show up at practice the other day, and a couple of my guys were like, "Hey, coach, who'd you have in your bracket winning?" And I'm like, "Okay, NCAA, got it."
Yeah.
I got it. March Madness, we're in March. Okay, I'm like Duke, right? And then they go nuts over me saying Duke, right? And then they ask me a question about Iowa and it's a month, and I'm like, Iowa. They're like, "Oh my God, coach knows about little things like that."
Yeah.
Help them, help that
Yeah. Just relationships.
that relationship, right?
Yeah.
So it is important to have that, to at least pop in on Twitter or pop in wherever,
Yeah.
how you going to get your news, and at least stay relevant and current with all those stuff. So the last piece I want to really mention is the mentorship piece.
Yeah.
Do you have mentors? Have you had mentors? And what role have they played in helping you find that balance? Kevin, can you go first?
Yeah. Have I had? The answer is no, and I don't mean that as a self pity type of thing. It just, for whatever reason, there was not. And I hope there's someone out there that doesn't think that, hey, there were certainly people I could speak to, but growing up, I didn't have a goalkeeper coach and didn't really have anyone that said this is how you do it. That may have been a good thing for me, because it's something that I want to then provide for someone. Maybe because it wasn't there for me, it makes me want to do it for others, and so I guess. In a good way, it sort of forced me to go out and find those answers on my own. In a bad way, you just lose a little of someone else's perspective. And there certainly were some folks that I could, ask, hey, can I grab a cup of coffee with you? So it's not that I was, on an island. It's just there wasn't really that, kind of, mentor mentee type of relationship. But like I said, I think sometimes that can be a good thing, just to figure out what you want to do. And now there's plenty of people that I would certainly reach out to for mentorship. So I'm talking about younger me, and now the older me, is that you always need to ask some, be comfortable asking for help, and try to instill that in our guys. When in anything, you just have to be comfortable asking for help, or even just advice.
What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. Strange enough, I followed a similar path that Kevin, I'd say, is like growing up. Not really. I mean, I grew up in a football family in Western Pennsylvania. So I think I always joke with people I played, because my grandfather, my dad, and my uncle couldn't tell me what I was doing wrong, because they didn't get it. They still don't get it. As I've become a coach, I've been very lucky to have some people, kind of help me along the way. And, I think the biggest mistake I made was being stubborn, Art, to be candid with you, of like, yeah, you need to find balance. You need to do these things. Oh, trust me, I'm 23. I know better than you. You've only done this for 20 years, and you kind of learn some of those mistakes as you go. I think nowadays for me, not only do I still have some of those people, I'm very fortunate from from playing in college to the first coach I worked with to others. I always call it more of like a co-op now. I think, like with Kevin, there's a lot of people that, I don't know if you would call it mentor mentee, but you would call, I call it co-op, because I call this friend who is this club director. I call this friend who's this GM, this one who's a Division I coach, this one who's a Division III. And we'll say like, hey, here's what I did. What have you been doing? Here's what I'm thinking. Or I need a session on this, or I need an idea about this, or I have this, like, I have this player who I can't get her in their set position quick enough, whatever it might be. Like,
Sure.
what are your thoughts? And so, yeah, I think the moral of it is, and Kevin hit it for me, nail on the head, is like, you have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be able to say, okay, I was kind of wrong. I think too many of us have a little too much pride in moments, and be willing to talk to those people, because those shared experiences mean so much. And it's such an opportunity, just like right now for us as we're talking, to learn and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? And you can try it. And it may work with your goalkeeper. It may not. It may work with another player. It may not. But at least you now have that mechanism or that idea or that coaching point or that teaching point or that idea, whatever it may be, to help move forward. So, yeah, like I said, Art, I think the moral of the story, I should have listened to people more when I had them. And now I find myself in the same spot with kids. Why aren't you listening to me? I know better than you.
Yeah,
and they're going,
runs deep. Yeah.
no, you don't. I'm like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, super, super critical. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be where I'm at now professionally without those individuals in my life.
And now with this last piece of mentorship, and some of the tools that you guys have and you guys use, how do you release that stress valve when there's, whether it's you didn't get the recruit you wanted, you didn't get the result you wanted. I mean, there's a certain amount of pressure in college sports to deliver, right? Whether it's to deliver for players, or is it to deliver wins, or to get to what X amount of people that you want to attend your ID camp.
Mm-hmm.
When those things happen, what do you do, Michael? How do you release that valve?
I think for me lately, it's one or two. It kind of becomes an all or nothing. I think sometimes sometimes it's motivating. Sometimes it's like, okay, we didn't get what we needed here, and it becomes a little motivating factor to, I don't want to say work harder, because I think at times, like, working harder isn't it. How can you work smarter? Or how can you we've actually been working with our group at CMU lately about, in the first session yesterday, with somebody working on mental toughness, strangely enough. So this all becomes very apt. And a lot of their speech yesterday, which has really stuck with me, was about neutrality. And, instead of going down the pipeline of, oh, the world is terrible and woe is me, or being unrealistically positive. Okay, so here's what happened. How can I evaluate it? How can I be better moving forward? So I think in the moment itself and figuring out how can I fix it. And then, like I said, sometimes in a lot of it, to be honest with you, Art, is based on timelines probably. If the class isn't exactly where we wanted, if all of a sudden we had an injury to a really important piece of the puzzle, if all of a sudden we were down to 2 goalkeepers and there's one left and we need to add more to the pipeline, I think those are the times where that kind of extra gear, and you're almost forced to kick in. I think when you have the flexibility in those moments, understanding that, hey, it's not always going to be perfect, and that's okay. And we're human. We're not always going to be perfect. We're not going to get it to go the way we want. And so I think those are the moments lately where I'm finding myself of like, you know what? I could spend my Friday night looking for that next player who's going to make all the difference, or I could spend it with family, or I could put this event on or do A, B, or C, knowing that, like you said, you find a little balance, as Kevin suggested, and we find a little bit better understanding, and you move forward the next day, So it is tough. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I'd write a book on it, maybe make a lot more money. But, like I said, I think it's important just to kind of, like I said, to sum it up, our decisions are probably based more on timelines than they are what we need at times. And then that's, I think, the balance which we're constantly looking at.
Kevin.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of run with one of those things that stood out that Michael said about, basically just kind of like, that some things are sort of out of your control, and the less we, try to control them, I think sometimes can give us a little bit of a relief. I guess my work smarter, not harder. For me, is just evolving as a coach. I feel like I'm much more transparent and put in a lot of work, to just make sure that they understand my expectations, and I guess just also show a little vulnerability too, so that, when we do have those moments where maybe if it's just the goalkeeping, that we all understand we're in it together. And then I'll never get sort of frustrated that, anyone's disappointed me or vice versa. If we're aligned, then at least we're going through it together. But at the same time, I think we also have those expectations. We're more accountable to each other. I can feel sometimes when I think the goalkeeper, maybe our number one is, a little bit like, this isn't good enough. We've got to bring more to this training session. And I feel it kicks me in the butt, and then I go, and vice versa sometimes. So I think just, control what you can control, and all the rest is just sort of the roller coaster of coaching, and just got to be okay with that. You can't just have sort of a mental breakdown because you've lost a few games. It's better to just, for me, I think, is just be real with the folks that are playing for you and figure out what's going wrong, and how can you fix it together. Maybe that's more the older side. Kids, maybe a whole different story.
I agree with Kevin there. Oh, sorry. I was going to say just
go ahead
real quick. The one thing we haven't probably hit on enough in that, as you said, going back to mentorship, what Kevin said, is that relationship component and that trust that gets built. And, that's where really special things happen, I think, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And just to speak really quickly on the neutrality piece of removing emotion from some of the decisions that we make, and not being reactive, not hitting that panic button right away, and just realize that there are things that we're not going to be able to control. There are things that we can, and being really wise about how we react, when we react, and being able to keep our emotions in check and whatnot. And we do that through the relationships, through planning, through our habits, our tools, all the resources that we have. So Michael, Kevin, I appreciate you both being here today.
Yeah, this is great.
And
thank you, Art.
No, thank you guys. And truly and honestly, this has been a great conversation, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue and sharing more information with our players, coaches, and our parents. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Art.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Kevin.
Good to catch up, Michael.